So one of the things that has come to my attention, because I'm an idiot and just wasn't thinking about it, is that I have not been leaving spoiler warnings on my videos. Quite honestly, I mostly made this YouTube channel just to have a place to put my thoughts about Wheel of Time and potentially other nerd-related topics, because I have just thought about these books way too much, and I just wanted to get my thoughts out there. I honestly wasn't really thinking about you guys, and it's shocked me that anyone actually watches my videos at all, honestly. So yeah, this is just something I didn't really think about. So I'm going to do my best to remember to put spoiler warnings on all my videos from here on out. Beginning, of course, with this one. This video is going to contain spoilers for the complete series, but actually the spoiler is a bit more nuanced than that. Because of the topic of this video, I'm going to say that you shouldn't watch this video if you haven't read the books at least twice, which I know sounds crazy, but let me explain. One of the reasons that I think Wheel of Time has such a dedicated fan base is because of how well the books stand up to a reread. In fact, I would even go so far as to say that the books get more enjoyable on a reread because you notice so much more. Things that seemed like throwaway lines, or perhaps even overly flowery language, or descriptions that seem too detailed, they can jump out at you when you know the full significance of what it is that you're reading. So what I wanted to talk about in this video were some of the favorite things that I noticed on a reread. And what I'm going to try and do is go through it book by book. So if you are in the process of your first reread, you can stop when I get to the book that you're in the middle of. And to be honest, this list is quite top heavy, by which I mean pretty much all of these are from early on in the series. And I'm not going to talk about the obvious ones, things like dreams, prophecies, revealed dark friends, viewings. I'm not going to talk about those unless I want to. Like if it's from something from a particularly memorable scene, then I'm going to mention it. But otherwise, just know that on a reread, the dreams, the viewings, the known dark friends, the prophecies, those are all super, super fun to watch. And so now we begin. And again, full spoilers. We're going to begin with Eye of the World. And we're going to start with something that I didn't notice, I don't think, until maybe my 10th reread, somewhere around there. And the reason I know that it was that far along is that this is something I didn't notice until I was listening to the audiobooks for the first time. I find it so strange. I'll hear people say things like, oh, because I was listening to the audiobook, I wasn't really paying attention. When for me, I noticed so many details that I had missed when reading the physical books by listening to the audiobooks, because you can't skim an audiobook. For me, I have to listen to every single word. And there's things like, well, I don't do this intentionally, but it turns out that when I'm reading a physical book, I skim pretty much all physical descriptions. Unless it's something that's like really emphasized and repeated over and over again, like an example, Perrin's beard, I just don't pay attention. For example, I remember being really surprised to learn that Nynaeve wasn't a redhead, because in my head, that's what she was. She was a redheaded woman. That might be because of the stereotype of, you know, redheads having fiery personalities. I really don't know. I have no idea where it came from. But that was what was happening in my head. And so I remember the first time listening to the audiobooks, stopping and rewinding the cassette. Because yeah, it was a cassette. I had borrowed it from the library. When I told you I was old, I wasn't joking. Anyway, I rewound the cassette and listened to it again and was like, who knew? I mean, I guess everybody knew who had read the description, but I didn't. Anyway, back to the topic of this video. This first one comes from the very beginning of Eye of the World. Rand is thinking about how bad the winter has been and how it must have been so much worse up in the mountains because wolves have been coming down into the two rivers and killing the sheep and the livestock all around the villages. Now, I could be wrong, but I really do think that those quote-unquote wolves were not wolves at all. I think those wolves were the first signs of Trollocs in the two rivers. The Trollocs, we know, have been coming to the two rivers through the ways. And they can't travel in large groups because we learn later that large groups attract Machin-Shin. So they've probably been coming in slowly in small groups over the period of time just before the story starts. And Trollocs got to eat. I mean, I could be wrong on this, but in my headcanon, that's totally what it is. That Rand unknowingly is foreshadowing the Trollocs that are about to attack. And that is awesome because it is so damn subtle. The next one I want to mention is probably the most obvious one. It's Rand's channeling. I've mentioned before that I love to follow new readers as they go through these books. It's so fun to see them theorizing and guessing and, of course, just enjoying the story. But one of the things that I find so frustrating is that they are all so much smarter than I was. They all seem to pick up on Rand's channeling. I mean, maybe if I had been podcasting or blogging and had been taking notes for that, I would have picked up on it too. I don't know, that's the excuse I use. I just know that I did not pick up on this at all. And this I only know for sure because I remember on my first reread that it hit me like a ton of bricks. Just like, oh my god, Rand was channeling the whole damn time. How did I not see it? I'm just an idiot. Anyway, moving on. There's also a super fun moment when the Emond's Field crew are fleeing from Trollocs. I think it's somewhere around Shadar Logoth. And one of the Trollocs manages to get his catch pulled around Mat's neck. Mat almost gets strung up by his neck in book 1. Again, possibly unintentional, but I choose to believe that it is totally foreshadowing, and it is awesome. And then, of course, a very, very super quick one, but the Tower of Genji, which is something that is integral to the plot of the second to last book in the series. You see that tower from Domon's boat in this book. It's just there. They don't really focus on it. It's just like, oh, look, tower, boom, move on. That comes up, 10 books, 11 books, 12 books, 13 books later. That's amazing. Okay, so let's move on from the Eye of the World to The Great Hunt. One fun one from early on in The Great Hunt is how Siuan basically outlines her and Egwene, sort of a combo of her and Egwene's storyline in a conversation with Moiraine. It's pretty cool, so I'm actually just going to read what she says to you. She says this. She goes, "Even stilled, an Amyrlin who has been pulled down cannot be allowed to wander about loose. She might be seen as a martyr, become a rallying point for opposition. Tetsuan and Bonwyn were kept in the White Tower as servants, scullery maids, who could be pointed to as cautions as to what can happen to the mightiest. No one can rally around a woman who must scrub floors and pots all day. Pity her? Yes. But rally to her? No. Siuan becomes a pulled-down Amyrlin who wanders around loose. And while she wasn't exactly a rallying point for the opposition, the Saladar Aes Sedai were already opposing Elaida when she showed up, she definitely helped them become more of an official opposition to Elaida. And then, of course, there's Egwene, who eventually is reduced to being a sort of servant, scullery maid, I guess, in the White Tower, and people totally rallied around her. This is so awesome. It's so early in the books, and it foreshadows things that happen so close to the end. It's amazing. And then, okay, so I said I wasn't going to bring up how fun it is to follow the plot of Dark Friends, unless it was something really super cool. Well, Varen is the definition of cool. Literally every scene she's in is like 10 times more awesome on a reread. And one of my favorites comes quite early in The Great Hunt. Although, again, this is a headcanon of mine that is never fully confirmed, but I feel fairly certain about it, and it makes things cooler if I'm right, at least to me. Once again, I should say that this is not something that I noticed on my first reread. This is probably somewhere when my rereads entered, the double digits. I can't really say for sure. Now, I know you think I'm about to talk about the lie, but no. So, early in The Great Hunt, we see that Varen is pretty observant and clever. We see her, gathering small clues together like a puzzle and putting them together and coming up with, Rand is the Dragon Reborn. Cool beans. Okay, so here's my headcanon on this. We know Varen is a Dark Friend. This book begins with a big old Dark Friend shindig, where Balzaman shows them all the holograms of the Emond's Field boys and basically tells them that one of these guys is the Dragon Reborn. There's an Aes Sedai at that shindig, and I think Varen was one of them. She saw the boys at that party, and then she sees them up in Faldara, when she's putting those clues together like puzzle pieces, she already had the biggest piece. That's why she was able to figure it out. I mean, that's my headcanon. And even if it's not true, I like it a lot. And then the final one from The Great Hunt I will mention is just a quick one. But Tuon is mentioned in this book. Book 2. Tuon doesn't show up until book 9. But her name is mentioned in passing as the Empress's favorite daughter by Turak. In book 2. Take that in for a second. That is awesome. So now, let's move on to The Dragon Reborn. And I've only picked one from this book, but it is my favorite. And yet again, I'm breaking my own rules. It involves another character that we learn later is a dark friend. Now, I know you're probably thinking I'm about to talk about the Gray Man, but I'm not. Although that scene is super cool to read when you know what's going on and all the undercurrents. Even though it's also so frustrating watching our girls get so close to the answer and then just not get there. It's a good frustrating, but it is frustrating nonetheless. But no. What I want to talk about is Egwene's accepted test. When Egwene comes out of the arches, I think it's like her second set of arches, she blurts out this to Sheriam. She says, he said they could turn him to the shadow. He said the Murdrolls and Dreadlords could force him. Now, the first time you read this, it's the last part of that sticks out. The revelation that channelers can be forcibly turned to the shadow. But on a reread, for me it was maybe like the 4th or 5th reread, what stuck out was that Egwene said, he said that they could force him. He said that the Murdroll and Dreadlords could force him. She clearly alludes to the fact that she knows a man who can channel. Now, I suppose it's possible that Sheriam could just think that Egwene's mind made up a character for the testing, and that's who Egwene is talking about. But later on, it's pretty clear that Egwene's tests involved a real person, and the same person, over and over and over again. And yet, Sheriam just totally brushed past the fact that Egwene apparently knows a male channeler, despite the fact that male channelers are literally one of the most dangerous things in the world. She brushed past it because she already knows, so that's not the part that shocks her, because she's Black Aja. She might have been at that Dark Friend shindig too. There were a couple of Aes Sedai there, although, to be honest, in my headcanon, those two were Varen and Alviarin. But Sheriam still probably knows, because the Black Aja has good intel. So when Egwene says, he said they could turn him, the he and the him meant nothing to her. It was, you know the secret. Like, that is really cool. Subtle and awesome. So let's move on to The Shadow Rising. For me, The Shadow Rising is a really fun book to read, not for foreshadowing for things that are coming up, but because it is where a lot of the foreshadowing that has happened in previous books comes to fruition, with a lot of things that happen in Ruidian and in the Waste. For example, that one I mentioned earlier about Mat getting strung up by the neck in book 1, that comes to pass here in book 4. But there is one small scene, again with Varen. Man, I said I wasn't going to talk about Dark Friends, but like, come on, it's Varen. I did say if it was super cool, Varen is super cool. Although this particular moment isn't entirely wrapped around her being a Dark Friend. It's just a cool moment that pays off 7 books later. So there's a moment right before the Battle of Emond's Field where Varen just sort of reaches out and she touches Perrin's axe and asks him when he's going to give it up for the hammer. I think by this point, the readers are aware of Perrin's internal conflict between the axe and a hammer. But is Varen? Why would Varen say that? Well, in Knife of Dreams, which is book 11, and remember, this is book 4, we finally hear a line from the prophecies, which goes, when the Wolf King carries the hammer, thus are the final days known. I am certain that Varen knows about Perrin's deal with the wolves, whether he's told her or not. She can see his eyes, she's a brown, she knows shit. And she also knows the prophecies. She also knows, the world also knows, that the dragon has been reborn, and therefore the final days are going to be known by everyone soon. She's just, once again, putting puzzle pieces together. She's got a wolf boy in front of her. He's carrying an axe. In the back of her mind, she knows about a prophecy about an axe and a hammer. This is a throwaway line that we don't understand until 7 books later. Man, the detail in these books, it is awesome. Okay, So I think I'm just going to do one more because video is getting long enough. And also because I really want to hear yours. I want to hear if any of yours align with mine. My last one is actually not a moment. It's more of a character. And because of that, I can't really specify a book. So if you are on your first reread and don't want this spoiled, this would be a time to leave us, and come back when you're done. But okay. It's not even actually a character that I want to talk about. It's the people and things that are around that character. I'm talking about Padan Fain. Padan Fain is so incredibly creepy and evil, but we learn throughout the books that it isn't just that he's evil within himself. Something about him corrupts the people that he comes in contact with. We see this explicitly with the White Cloaks. And so it is so interesting to see that wherever he goes, whoever he interacts with, he twists them and he corrupts them. I don't even know how many rereads I was on before I realized that one of those people was Elida. I think it's because we're conditioned to hate her. She is such an unpleasant person that we don't notice it. But now I am convinced that part of the reason she becomes so incredibly unreasonable and incredibly unhinged is because of Fain's corruption. And that is amazing. It is subtle. Again, it is not something I can say is completely and 100% confirmed explicitly in the narrative. But it follows from what we see and what we know of Padan Fain and what we know of her. She goes from being an incredibly unpleasant but intelligent woman to being completely power mad and unhinged. And I think that's Fain's corruption. And that is incredible. It is awesome. Anyway, I think I'll stop here. I really would love to hear yours, so please leave a comment below. And as always, like, subscribe, and stick around for the art credits.